Hello again and welcome to Arthur's Engage Reviews. This is number 5 and as you can see by the titles here, we're in 060 territory. But first, a big thank you to all those who have commented and given me feedback. There's been quite a while between numbers 4 and number 5, and that's because of the amount of feedback I got and taking items on board. Thank you Mick down south and a lot of other people for some very constructive comments. Anyway, let's get rid of the boxes and have a look at what we're going to see. That is the old Graham Farish 4F. Standing next door is the Union Mills 3F, and next door to that is the Union Mills 2F. All Midland Railway design and all encompassing the Midlands small engine policy, just to make up the party, because there will be a bit of double heading, is another 3F, and that one is in LMS livery. The idea originally of this was to compare and review the Union Mills 3Fs with the brand new Graham Farish 4F from China, the 3F being a very popular model and the 4F being brand new. Well, now I'm videoing this in October 2014, so we're 5/6 through the year, and guess what, the 4F still hasn't arrived from China. I now believe it's due in 2015. So basically what I've done instead is to have a look at the old 4F, which we have here, and compared, for those who don't know, with the 3Fs and the 2Fs. And looking at the there is a few pictures online that you can see of these three classes together in real life, but not very much exists in the way of pictorial film. If we were to compare, let's say, the 3F and the 4F as locomotives and models, I'd say that the 3F has got a smaller and lower pitch boiler than the 4F here. It's got a taller funnel than the 4F and a taller round topped dome. Similarly, if we then compare coming down to the 2F with the 3F, we see that it has an even smaller boiler, which is again lower pitched, and an even taller chimney. The 2F, this particular model one, and most of them as well, had an extension at the side of the cab there, which you don't see in the 3F and you don't see in the 4F. So let's have a look at these three models individually before we put them on the track and see how they run. So let's have a look at the 4F, and you'll notice I've taken the loco and tender apart on purpose on this one. First thing you notice is the solid wheels, although the spokes have been modelled, and these pickups, which are very visible, and I've never known why the company didn't paint them black before they went out. Anyway, by the by, the motor protrudes into the cab. All handrails are moulded, and it's missing the handrail that goes roof to bottom at the base of the cab, which was such a feature of all these locomotives. At the front end, there you go, get it straight. No vac pipes or anything been moulded. Number nicely done, as is the shed plate, which is showing us 67A. That makes it a Corker Hill. Corker Hill was southwest of the centre of Glasgow. So it's a Scottish engine, which is correct for this number and this period, according to my records, at least. And in fact, it's nice it's a Scottish engine because she was actually built in Scotland, this particular one, at St Rollock's Works. Coming on to the tender, now this is a bit of a different story. It's basically an empty box. Coal is moulded all the way to the end, and there's this huge hole here for a wire to go through. There are no pickups, but you can buy a conversion, and there's a YouTube video that shows you how to fit if you so desire. And on my one, rear buffer is black, where on some models it's red, and some of the real ones it's red, but I'm sure there were some black ones around as well. How prototypical is that? I don't know. Right, we'll get that running in a second. So, all said, visually it's actually a nice model. I've been very, very picky, and it looks right. It looks like the prototype at distance, and also when it's moving on the track. One thing I forgot to mention is the funnel is in two parts. It's a bit cauliflower-ish for my liking, but if you really didn't like that, you could actually put that to rights. Right, before we start running, of course, that all-important thing, weight. The model combined weighs 71 grams, which will be about half of one of these Union Mills. The engine itself comes in at 56 grams, which is quite weighty, but unfortunately, of course, it's going to be close coupled to this empty box tender, which only weighs 15 grams. So the thought of 71 grams pushing 15 grams reverse wise through very short points like this, I don't think it's going to make it. But there again, we'll see. Have a similar look at the Union Mills 2F and 3F, and almost from a modelling point of view, the 2F and the 3F are exactly the same. They've got the same tender drive, exactly the same, and we know that the tender has solid wheels, no spokes. The model itself, yes, between engine and tender, although it's quite well hidden here, particularly by this fellow with a crew member, you have the large wire. I don't know if you can actually see it there because I've pushed it up into the cab to hide it, but there's a very obvious wire protruding. These are all metal, so everything is moulded, handrails, etc. And again, like the Farish 4F, the pole is missing from the handrail, I should say, is missing from the back of the cab. Be a bit careful when you're modelling 2Fs because they did change over time. Some of them had different cabs and even different boilers, but I'll go on to explain that later. At the front end, nicely modelled. We don't have a shed plate for this one printed on, but we have a nice number, and again, no vac pipes or anything like that, and some rather red buffer beams front and back. And those comments basically are good for both the 2Fs and the 3Fs, which of course basically started off as the same the same class. The 2F is a development of the lighter Midland Railway 060 single framed loco, introduced as way back as 1875 by Samuel Johnson, and they were built with slight variations all the way up until 1902, when by which time there were 865 in the class. And then, of course, as traffic increased, they started being rebuilt with bigger boilers by Richard Dealey. Some of them being rebuilt and staying as 2Fs, some of them with a larger boiler became 3Fs. And these are a very long lasting locomotive. Some of these were still around in the 1960s, and in fact I've seen classes of these in the 1960s, particularly in the Midlands, around about the Birmingham area, Burton, down to Rugby. Very common, and at that time they were the oldest locomotives, steam locomotives, still left on British Railways. The Union Mills models, of course, have got traction tyres and pickups throughout the length of both the locomotive and the tender. Let's talk weights and numbers. Now then, the 3F, these fellas here, the tenders with the motor in them weigh in at 60 grams, and the locomotives themselves are 57 grams, so the total weight is 117 grams, and the loco at 57 grams, we've got pickups in it, but without a motor, is actually heavier than the 4F from Farish with a motor in it. So they're very heavy. Our 2F here has got about the same weight as the 3F, or as little as makes no difference, and of course 60 grams for the tender. 58153, interesting number. She was basically a Nottinghamshire engine at the time this was modelled. Bounced between Towton 18A and Hasland 18C. Her last shed was in fact Towton. Weight of the real locomotive was 37 tonnes 1200 weight. Moving on to 3Fs. As numbered, 3766 or 43766, which is very much a Derby engine. She was built at Derby Works and cut up at Derby Works in 1962. Round about the time of this colour scheme, she was a 15D Bedford engine, and we don't know much about 3214 in LMS livery, but certainly she became number 43214 in BR days, and in the 1948 loco book we've got her at Burton 17B, and in 50 and 55 she's moving to 21A Saltley. If you don't know Saltley, it's a shed just outside the centre of Birmingham on the line between Birmingham and Derby, a huge freight shed. Finally, on numbers, I should mention that Graham Farish produced the 4F in any number of numbers over the years, both in LMS versions and British Railways version with a 40,000 added. In the Union Mills you can get a 2F in LMS version, that's number 22958, which was very much a Derby locomotive from all accounts. She ended up her life being at 58144, and in that very popular Union Mills 3F, it has been known to be available in red livery, but also in the beautiful blue Prussian Blue, Somerset and Dorset livery, and of course both the 3Fs and the 4Fs were built for the Somerset and Dorset Railway. Off we go. This is the Farish 4F at medium speed. It's a new model, so it's actually being running, and it's not liking these small points. Whether it's the track at fault or the loco, I'm not sure, but I fancy it's the track. Okay, so here we have our 4F on Graham Farish with 4 lemurs on the back. Seems quite happy at slow and train set speed. This is still running in, this locomotive, even though it's the old style. And as you can see, she doesn't look too bad at all there. Let's up it to 7 and see what happens. The locomotive now with 7 on is handling much better. It's got some weight behind, but I do have my doubts about that tender. Right, quick look at the 2F performing stunts with the 7 lemurs. Because we can. Right, as the 2F rolls the stock round, and the 3Fs can do exactly the same, whether singly or coupled together. But this is a classic case of the Union Mills model that's actually going to pull anything that we have for it. And again, 2F being the lowest power band, but there again the model itself will outperform anything, and it's also immensely controllable like that. One thing I dislike actually about the Graham Farish 4F, and I hate to keep harping on about this, is that underneath, and I'll show a picture, the gear wheel protrudes right from the centre driver. It means if it hits anything on the track, it's a recipe for derailment, because not only will it stop the engine going forward, backwards if it's going that way, it will also lift it. And with that very light tender on the back, I think that's a recipe for relatively poor running. Well, let's hope that the new 4F is an improvement on that. And just before we go to the pictures, you might be wondering why we have some other 4Fs in the yard. Well, you can never have enough 060 freight engines. They were the most numerous class of locos in the whole of the British Isles, and when you really forget your Pacifics and you flash, these are the fellas that earn money. Never have enough. and these were all lined up ready to tell the story of the 4F and introduce the new Farish one. But that, ladies and gentlemen, will have to wait until next year. Okay, so now it's 3F time. Relax, sit back and enjoy, hopefully, some fault-free running that will show why Union Mills locomotives, particularly the 3Fs, I like these, are thought of so highly. So while we're watching this, what can we do to improve the, all the models, the 2, 3 and the 4Fs? All types can obviously be converted to DCC. I've mentioned previously that Union Mills are able to be converted to DCC. Should you feel the need, however, converting the Farish 4F has to be considered against the imminent, and that is 2015, arrival of the latest version, which will already obviously be DCC compatible. So let's look at simple improvements that you can do to all three locomotive types. Adding vacuum pipes, crew, real coal, fairly obvious, but they do improve a model no end. More advanced modelers might want to repaint and of course renumber. Now, renumbering a loco is one of those things that you can fairly easily do because the numbers are available from various companies, and renumbering a loco they're updated in your modelled area or your modelled era is great. It adds interest, and dare I say, I believe it adds value to your model as well. It's always wise, of course, to work from a photograph when renumbering to ensure accuracy. The 4F that we have here, of course, it is 44330, as already stated, was a Scottish engine, but by changing one number to say 44230, you get a Nottingham engine. Mind, of course, your photographs, but it's as simple as that. Likewise, adding running lights or lamps is great for super detailing, but having an express lamp portrayed at all times on your model is not really prototypical, and it could constrain your model to one type of operation. Of course, if you're operating an exhibition layout when, say, your trains are in sections, then of course that's okay. So talking about repainting, of course, and weathering. I mean, yes, it's a subject I could bore for hours on. Anyway, repainting, if you fancy it. Now, Union Mills have made the 3F available in a variety of liveries over the year. One of those liveries was red, but perhaps we should gloss over that. More importantly, the 3F is and has been available in the attractive Prussian, let's try again with the teeth in, Prussian blue livery of the Somerset and Dorset Railway. And it's to be noted, of course, that the Somerset and Dorset Railway had both 3F and 4F locomotives in its fleet over time. No, not forgetting the 2F. What could we do on a repaint with that? Well, if you fancy it, it's now 100 years from the start of World War One. You could repaint your locomotive as an ROD engine, perhaps on its way to France, or maybe having come back from France. And don't forget that you can also backdate these locos by adding the old Ramsbottom safety valves as well, which of course alters the profile of the locomotives and puts them back in time very easily. Finally, let's talk about the really advanced modelers who want to butcher their way to create something. And the 2F, of course, it would be an ideal starting point, in my view, for this sort of operation. Even if it stays as a 2F, you could have it with one of the round top boilers, a different cab. I think that advanced models with the 4F have possibly got an opportunity here, because over time there's a lot of these locomotives sold, I believe, and over time they're going to become very cheaply available, we hope, via the auction sites. So if you could pick up a 4F in reasonable condition for say £25, and then, well, let's go to work on the tender, having super detailed the loco. Now, tender cab would be an obvious choice. How about a tender with a coal cover for working with a snowplough? And that would make a nice diorama alongside one of the Engaged Society's snowplows. That even if it just sat in your locomotive shed at the back, it might look pretty good. Anyway, enough of cutting, spraying and filing our way to different locos. Let's have a look at some marks for these three locomotives classes that we have in front of us. Now, when it comes to marking, I've been looking at some of the feedback that you sent me, and what I've decided to do is mark in basically three categories, what I call the 3 Ps, and these categories are price, performance, and how prototypical the locomotive or the model is. We shall also give a few bonus marks as and when they become, to cover other things or anything that I can possibly think of. Anyway, let's look at the 4F. So, price. Well, actually, these were always, I always thought, expensive for what you were getting. I believe the last RRP on the model was £91, which is quite a lot for what was a fairly old design. So 80 out of 100 for price. Performance, again, 80 out of 100. I haven't shown much of this locomotive going around the test track, and that is because I think it would be unfair. The model seems to perform very well if everything is in its favour, i.e. a long piece of straight track that's clean and level. The model does seem to find all the faults in the track, particularly when it's running over points with that big cogwheel in the centre that's designed to catch anything that you've left loafing in the middle of the 6 foot. in the middle of the 4.5 foot, I should say. So again, 80 out of 100. How prototypical? Well, actually, it is a good-looking model. The engine itself, ignoring the tender, which is a very plainly modelled box, the locomotive himself has captured the look of the prototype. So I think from that point of view, Farish, going back a fair while, had made a good job. So 88 out of 100. Bonus marks. Yes, 5 in this instance, I believe, and the reason for giving bonus marks is because I think for £25 or so in the near future you're going to be able to pick up these models, and then, you know, as a £25 model in good condition, it's got a lot going for it. So that's the 4F. Now we come down to the 3F. Price, our 3F. Well, I think 85 out of 100. Now that's about the same mark as I've given for all Union Mills models that I've reviewed, because I do think they're good value for money. Performance, 90 out of 100. It could be higher, that they are super performing models. Prototypical, well, now this is where I suppose Union Mills models do get marked down, and 80 out of 100 in the instance of the 3F. I might as well do the 2F while I'm at it, because the 2F is going to score 85 on price, 90 on performance, and 80 as prototypical, the same as the 3F, because basically the tender is the same model, the motor is in the tender. It is only detailed differences of the locomotive itself that makes them different classes and different models. And just to recap, we are marking the Union Mills models down to 80 as a prototype, simply because they're made of cast metal, the detail is all moulded. Yes, they could be better, but at what price? Okay, bonus marks. 3F. 10 bonus marks for the 3F and 5 for the 2F. There are 5 bonus marks for 2F because it's such an interesting model, I feel. Why am I giving 10 bonus marks for the 3F? Well, I think again, this is a model that's got everything going for it. Now, the LMS version of the 3F was bought by me from an auction site, and on a couple of occasions I've taken it and a few old Lima coaches along to various shows with this test track and just let kids play. And yes, they've driven this thing at 150 mile an hour and it's come off on the corners, and it's been heavily handled by kids starting out in Engage. And at the end of the day, what can I do with this loco when all the numbers are rubbed off? It'll still run. Well, even if it doesn't, I can replace the tender motor very cheaply from Union Mills. That effectively is going to double the life of the loco. I can repaint it into whatever it is. And for the kids, I mean, I could have painted it in purple and put a yellow face on it and done all those sorts of things, and then given it a second life, repainted, renumbered in the back of the engine shed, and still able to haul 40 or 50 wagons around any layout and look good. So yes, it's getting 10 bonus marks from me, and while I'm at it, I might as well give the same for the British Rails version of the 3F, because that can also do the same. Right, we've come to the end of our expose on these 3 classes of models and the LMS small engine policy. So locomotives of the major constituent companies of the LMS were actually wittingly summed up by one D.W. Stanford, who was the engineer in charge of testing at Derby, and one of the few Midland men of the day, and we're talking about LMS days now, who was willing to crack a joke at the expense of his old company. In a discussion at the Institute of Locomotive Engineers on post-grouping policy, he said, "At Derby, the nice little engines were made pets of. They were housed in nice clean sheds and were very lightly loaded. There must have been a Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Engines in existence." He also went on to say some things about the London North Western Railway engines, and also one of the other constituent companies, but we'll keep that for another day. Recently, here's the news, yes, okay, video bloggers or vloggers, which I suppose loosely we could term ourselves at, they need to make it clear when they are paid to promote products. The Advertising Standards Agency has warned the new guidance to vloggers, and I'm talking in December now, 2014, the new guidance to vloggers was issued following an investigation by none other than the BBC. So, if anyone out there thinks that I'm being paid to promote any of the companies featured in any of my videos, I can tell you the answer categorically is no. It's far more likely that the companies would prefer that anoraks like me and my like would possibly go away. So that's it. You're off the hook, folks. You can almost switch off this video. What are we going to do next? Well, I actually don't know. The shed where I do these things is unheated. It's in my garden and it's currently quite cold out there. So it may be that we won't actually produce anything until 2015 now. 2015, I'm looking forward to the new Graham Farish 4F and the new Graham Farish Duchess. So it might be that we'll crack into the new year with an early look at those two, should they arrive, that is. Or we could finish off the old Farish locomotives that haven't been looked at, and I'm thinking particularly here of the 8F and the Crab, which are both good models in their own right. Or how about another one of these videos where we look at more than one class at the same time? Feedback. I'm thinking of possibly doing a Farish tank engine. We've got the old 264 decent model. We have the new Farish 264, and of course the standard 262, which is one that is highly thought of by yours truly. Anyway, food for thought. There you are. Goodbye for now. Hope you've enjoyed this.